Repentance. Celestia massaged her temple for a moment. It was all but impossible for her to get headaches, but now she was certain that she was drifting closer to developing one. No. The representative from the High Lords blinked in surprise for a moment. But Empress, he started. It is a means by which we can increase the prosperity of the Imperium. No, it is a means by which the High Lords can take more control of the Imperium's resources for their own gain, Celestia replied, removing her hand from her temple and straightening up in her seat. The Imperium is already overtaxed as it is, and diverting more resources to ensure the High Lords have their own fleet for the coming crusade is absurd. But then your forces would not be overextended. Had I any faith in your Lord's leadership skills, that would be a valid point. Alas, I do not, and I still see no reason why I should divert funds from building that fleet. Your request is denied. The man stuttered for a moment, his jaw flapping uselessly as he tried to think of the right thing to say to avoid upsetting his god. Finally, he gave up and bowed low, shuffling off into the gloom as the custodes took their positions once more. Once Celestia was certain she was alone again, she sighed and leaned back in her throne. They need to understand that I am not ready to turn the fate of the Imperium over to them, she said, palming her forehead once more. Why can't they understand? There was a lengthy pause, silence reigning in the throne room save from the shuffling of the custodes and the Mechanicu's adepts working on the Astronomicon. I should have thought better than sending Twilight out, she thought. I could use someone to talk to on a closer level. Celestia was roused from her thoughts as a custodes approached the throne. Empress, the warrior said. Representatives from the Minotaurs and Imperial Fist chapters have requested to speak to you. What joy! I will speak with them. Celestia said, rising from the throne before continuing. Are there any other outstanding meetings? Inquisitor Masha's group has returned from their mission, the custodes said. They will arrive once you are finished with the Asteroids. Of course, of course. Celestia nodded. Send in the representatives. The custodes bowed and departed, Celestia focusing her powers for a moment to get a better sense of the soldiers that approached. The first was the representative from the Imperial Fists, the yellow armor the Space Marine wore clearly visible even in the darkest shadows. Red trim indicated his command over the Third Company, and he bore numerous badges of honor such as the Crux Terminus on his left shoulder and the Golden Eagle on his right. The Asteroids was bald, revealing a small series of metal studs set in his forehead to indicate service to the Imperium. His companion was much more eye-catching. The Asteroids wore a great suit of bronze Terminator armor, his face hidden beneath a plumed helmet. A Guardian spear variant hung from his hip, and his left arm was sheathed in a great storm shield adorned with the red bull of the Minotaurs. He appeared calm, but closer examination revealed slight tension in the Astarte's body, as if he were prepared to lash out at the slightest provocation. Astrian Moloch could intimidate many a foe. Celestia was not among them. Welcome, Celestia said, her voice controlled. I take it that you have come to challenge the claims I have put forth. We have, Moloch said, stopping a good distance from Celestia. It is not every day that a woman comes forth and claims to be the Emperor reborn. It is an unusual situation, Celestia said before looking towards the Imperial Fist, reaching out with her powers. And what do you think, Captain Bremer? Do you take me for a daemon seeking to end the Imperium? There was a pause, the Asteroids showing discomfort at Celestia knowing his name. It is not impossible. Bremer started. There have been many who have claimed to be the Emperor reborn, many of which have presented quite damning evidence. My brothers need more evidence to prove that you truly are who you say. As if my message were not enough. Celestia asked, her voice growing harsh for a moment. You are all of sound mind, what would you accept as proof to my words? There is little, truly. Moloch said, the chapter master moving to circle Celestia. You possess great power and skill, no doubt, but you come into the imperial palace like a common beggar and then suddenly claim divinity. That you did not call your legions to you when you first appeared is also suspicious. But would it not also be suspicious to our enemies that the Asteroids were once again assembling? Celestia asked. Would the Imperium be willing to weather such a storm? Especially with your fathers having given up my command to reform the Lords of Terra. That was considered too radical after the generation of Titus passed, Bremer replied. It is the purpose of the Asteroutes to guard humanity, not rule over it. And with the threats presented in the past millennia we needed all who were ready and able to fight. A fair argument, but you have allowed the corrupt and cowardly to regain control. Celestia turned slightly so she could face both of the Asteroutes. Is this what my sons have become, that they care more for killing than for the survival of the people they fight for? You are not one to judge our actions, Moloch growled. If you were truly the Emperor, you would understand that too much attention paid to the High Lords would allow our enemies without to close in and damage the Imperium. As if you would be speaking of the enemy within, my friend. Celestia countered. Answer me this, is it by your own volition that you stand before me, or at the insistence of the High Lords that you challenge my authority? The Imperial Fist Captain shuffled around for a moment, but the Lord of the Minotaurs quivered with barely controlled anger. What makes you think you have the authority to challenge me in such a way, he asked. I should have the right to know the true motives of my accusers. Celestia replied. If you are truly so confident that I am not who I say I am, why continue to question me? Strike me down and prove to the Imperium that you truly serve them, and are not merely the dogs of the High Lords. Silence reigned in the throne room once more. Celestia fought the urge to chew her lip. Perhaps she was goading the Asteroutes too much, drawing them into a confrontation neither would benefit from. Captain Bremer seemed to be the neutral party in the engagement, and perhaps engaging him would be enough to stem the Space Marines' concerns. Or, I could just show them what I had shown the High Lords, she mused. It worked well enough last time. All parties were prevented from speaking when one of the custodes approached. Empress, he said, bowing low. The delegation from Inquisitor Mashes has arrived, and they wish to speak with you immediately. I asked that they wait for me to send for them. Celestia said. I explained as much, but the one who walks with them was highly persuasive. Celestia raised an eyebrow at this. The soldier was obviously hiding the full truth from her, but was controlling himself well enough that a simple probe would be futile. Very well. Send them in. The custodes nodded and disappeared back into the darkness, leaving Celestia alone with the Space Marines once more. With all due respect, Captain Bremer started. I fail to see how the worries of one Inquisitor eclipse the conversation on whether you are who you claim to be. On the contrary, the mission I sent the young Inquisitor on was of utmost importance to the safety of the Imperium, Celestia started. It will only be a momentary distraction, after which we will continue with our discussion. A chance to bring more allies to her side, no doubt. Moloch said, but the others paid him no mind. Celestia instead straightened up slightly, preparing for whatever it was Mashes and Twilight had uncovered. Seeing one of her sons walk out of the darkness to her left, though, was something she was not prepared for. His armor was dulled and scratched, his hair a ragged mess that looked as if someone had cut it with a sword, and with his lightning claws and jump pack missing he looked far less imposing than he should have. Still, Celestia nearly choked on her breath as Corax stepped out of the shadows, her hands quivering ever so slightly as the two regarded each other for a moment. Corax, she said finally. You're alive. Emperor, the Primarch started. You're a woman. Well, yes, she said. She would have continued further, but her attention was drawn back to the two Asteroutes gawking at the sight of the returned Primarch. If you would please excuse us for a moment. I would speak with Lord Corax alone. There is still the matter of leave. Now. Celestia growled, a small bit of her power causing her hair to flare slightly. The Asteroutes hesitated for a moment, but complied and moved off into the darkness. Celestia could now turn her attention to Corax. A blitz of thoughts and emotions welled over her, and it took a great portion of her will to keep her from stepping forward and pulling the Primarch into a hug. This is not Equestria, she thought. The relation between you and the Primarches is not the same as with you and Luna. Damn it, why did I just push them away? Corax, she started, mentally stumbling over what to say next. You look well. Thank you. Corax replied, still greatly confused. And, you have yet to explain to me why you are a woman. That is a long story, I am afraid, Celestia replied, some of her confidence returning. And no, I am quite fond of this form and do not intend to go back. I would not be the one to question that. Silence reigned again, Celestia tightening her hands a few times before speaking again. But, what happened to you? For 10,000 years I searched for you, yet I could never find you. I thought you had perished, as Dorn had. You forget, Empress, that I was always gifted at hiding myself from the sight of others, even you. Corax's face grew serious. Which I suppose you did, the first time you returned. The first time? Celestia repeated before continuing. I needed to ascend and defeat the forces of chaos. For that, I am not judging you, but that you would ascend so abruptly. Corax drew closer. For 10,000 years I waited, looking for some way that I could absolve myself before you, but as you were entombed in the throne there was no way I could see that my actions meant anything. I killed many, traitors and Xenos alike, but not once did I think that the blood I spilled then was enough to make up for my own failings. Celestia wanted to speak, to assure Corax that was not true, but refrained from interrupting the Primarch. When I heard that you had restored yourself, I did not believe it at first. I thought it was just another lie to lure me into a state of vulnerability. When I learned it was the truth, I rushed to Terra to see for myself and perhaps end my wandering. The Primarch smiled for the briefest of instances, but it vanished almost as soon as it had appeared. But when I arrived, you were gone. I watched from the shadows as the people of the Imperium rebuilt, but never once did you make any sign of returning. A century passed, and your wardens died, and yet you did not return to us. It was out of my control, Corax, Celestia explained. Were I who the Imperium says I am, I could have destroyed the Chaos Gods and returned before they had realized that I was gone, but I am not a true god. And why did you not step up and reveal yourself to the people of the Imperium? Your guidance and wisdom would not be lost to humanity at this. Corax hesitated. I couldn't, he said. I could not look upon them, not after what I did. Corax, if you blame yourself for what happened with those recruits. Celestia started. They had no choice. Corax cried, his composure breaking for the briefest of instances. That was a time when a man had a say in his future, when he could choose how to give his life for the Imperium, and I betrayed that choice. I betrayed the very people I swore to defend from the enemies around us, forcing those who could not speak for themselves down a path to destruction and ruin. I still see them, twisted mockeries of all that makes humanity strong, a monument to my arrogance and unwillingness to listen. I do not consider desperation to be synonymous with arrogance. Celestia replied. Arrogance would be demanding I turn over my secrets when there was nothing to gain but your own glory. And no one should know the full price of arrogance than me, Corax. My brush with death at the hands of Horus was more than enough to let me know I had brought my own downfall. This caused Corax to hesitate again. I suppose there is reason behind your thinking, he said finally. My time alone has given me some perspective on what we did, what you said. But my own sins, he shook his head. Those, I still cannot run from. Celestia paused before speaking, her mind turning over Corax's words several times. It is my forgiveness you seek, is it not? She asked, closing her eyes for a moment. You see your actions as a crime against humanity, and to some extent against my mission. That would also explain why you went into hiding after my ascension. Though I am surprised that you did not learn of my return sooner. I hid myself well, Corax replied. It took a few well-placed words from your student to draw me out. Celestia could not help but smile. See, Twilight, you are already making a meaningful impact on the Imperium. She has a knack for it, Celestia replied. And now you stand before me, asking for forgiveness. Corax, I have never once blamed you for any wrongdoing. Again, Corax seemed confused. But I ignored your warnings, he started. What I did could have happened to any who attempted what you did. Celestia said. Even in my earliest experiments, my results were not as great as I would have hoped. But if it is forgiveness you truly seek, you have found it. Celestia reached out a hand towards him. Will you stand by my side again, one last time? There was a lengthy pause, Corax shifting ever so slightly. Is that it? Corax asked. That is all I need for my redemption. Not every quest for redemption must start with a great task, Celestia said. Sometimes, it begins with but a simple step. Now the question remains, will you accept my offer and take up your title of Primarch once more, or will you not? Corax hesitated for several moments, his eyes darting between Celestia and her hand. Another pause, and he gave his answer. It doesn't usually take this long for her to come to a decision, Twilight mused. Really? Sister Naomi asked. I suppose you would know the Empress better than all of us. When making an important decision, how long is usually? About 5 hours, 27 minutes, and 3 seconds, give or take. Twilight rattled off. It's been 3 days, and no one has come out of the throne room. What are they talking about in there that would keep them busy for 3 days? I am not one to question the Empress' actions, Lady Terra. Naomi replied. Rest now, for it would be best to be prepared for when the Empress does return. Twilight nodded, taking a seat next to the Sister Superior. She tried to think of something, anything, to get her mind off of what Celestia and Corax could be talking about, but nothing could draw her away. Were they talking about that unspeakable thing Corax kept mentioning? Were they talking about her? Twilight buried her head in her arms. Why did she have to keep overthinking these things? Another thought crossed her mind, Twilight raising her head to look at Sister Naomi. The woman was standing at attention, eyes facing straight ahead, at least as far as Twilight could tell, being that Naomi was still wearing her helmet. Sister Naomi. Twilight started. Yes, Lady Terra. Naomi replied, still staring forward. Why do you always wear your helmet? There was a lengthy pause, Naomi quivering slightly as Twilight looked on. That, she started. That does not matter. Yes it does. Twilight replied. I have gotten to know you and your sisters, and they sing praises about how great of a commander you are. But I can't put a face to the name as long as you keep your helmet on. Twilight smiled. You have nothing to hide from me. I am not hiding anything. Naomi snapped. You're not a very good liar, you know. Twilight replied. Please tell me. It is a personal matter, my lady. Naomi replied. You do not have to trouble yourself with it. Yes, I do. Twilight rose and turned the sister towards her. Whatever it is has affected you, and not exactly in a positive way. I want to help, Naomi, but you can't just drive me away and pretend like nothing's wrong. Twilight frowned before continuing. Why don't you want my help? I am an embarrassment, Naomi said, hanging her head. Were you to see my face, you would understand. I would not be surprised if you withdrew in horror from what you saw. Why? Twilight asked. Naomi paused for a moment, quivering once more. Finally, she sighed and reached to her face, undoing the restraints on her helmet before lifting it from her head. Unlike Sister Bianca, it was easier to tell that Naomi was an older woman. Her face was lined, her hair a steely grey, and her eyes were hard to the point of being unresponsive. But it was the mark on her face that drew Twilight's attention. It dominated most of her right cheek, black scars clashing with the white of her skin. The mark was like that of a flower with blades for petals and thorns running down the stub of a stem. This, Naomi started, is why I keep my face hidden from others. Twilight blinked a few times, unsure of how exactly to proceed. She started. What is it? This is the mark of the Blade Lotus, Naomi explained, turning away from Twilight and stepping away. Truly detestable Xenos brand their slaves with this mark to show their ownership. I have another, on my back, but that is more easily concealed than my face. You were a slave. Slavery was all but unheard of in Equestria. It was something that occurred in old tales about diamond dogs and changelings, a horrible act that Twilight never wished on anyone. No, I was not. But had my saviors been less timely, I would have been. Naomi sighed. I was a child on a world far from Terra and the light of the Emperor. The horrors of the galaxy were but stories my mother and grandmother told me to get me to behave, to be a good girl for the rest of the village. But when I was 7, I learned quickly that there really were monsters in the world, and I suppose, angels too. They had attacked at night, just as the last of the village had gone to sleep. Dozens of them, sweeping out of the darkness like ghosts, their cart things hovering on air as they leapt upon their unsuspecting foes. The men of the village stood no chance, their weapons useless against the monster's armor. In 3 minutes, they were all dead. Now, the monsters fell upon the others. Naomi had hid, ducking into one of the cabinets she used to hide from her brothers during play. But the monsters were better hunters than they, and had found her hiding spot far too easily. They were tall, taller than the biggest men and thinner than the most beautiful women, and they were dressed in black and red armor lined with a variety of blades. They took her, just as they took anyone who remained alive after the attack. Naomi shivered, her thin nightgown useless against the cold of night. Around her the village burned, the monsters cackling as they darted away from destroyed houses and barns. The one dragging her paid them no mind, tightening its grip around Naomi's arm as it pulled her towards another collection of monsters. Naomi gave a small whimper as the sharp edges of the monster's gauntlet cut into her skin, a thin line of blood trickling down her arm. A whelp, one monster with 3 arms spat. "You bring a whelp back to me." The others were dead, the one dragging Naomi said before shoving her into the mud. "This one, though, may serve a use. As a snack, I am sure," the 3-armed one said, drifting forward and leering down at Naomi. She whimpered again, drawing back from the monster as best she could. "I'll be good," she whispered. Mama said to be a good girl." "I'll be good." "Oh, I'm sure," the monster said, its face twisting into a mockery of a smile. Naomi gave a small cry as it took her face in one hand, pushing her head back and forth to inspect her. Tears slipped down Naomi's face, dripping around the monster's hand in small puddles. "Pathetic, but there is still plenty to harvest from this girl." The monster withdrew, dropping Naomi back into the mud. "Mark her. I know of a few archons who would pay handsomely for a monkey whelp." The 3-armed monster withdrew, and the others moved forward to pin Naomi against the ground. She struggled, trying and failing to free herself as the monsters tore her nightgown away, exposing her fully to the elements around her. "Please," she sobbed. "I'll be good. Please." "Oh, we understand," one monster said as it passed a glowing, flower-shaped tool to one of its fellows. "Now be a good monkey whelp, and scream." Naomi had little time to react before they jabbed the tool into her cheek, a similar device stabbing into her back between her shoulders. Naomi had burned her hand once, when she had tried to prove to her mother that she was old enough to handle cooking on her own. It was a sharp pain, but it had dulled after a while and left a bright red mark. The pain she felt now, though, was like her initial burn tenfold. She screamed as her skin burned, her tears turning to steam against the brands. The pain dug under her skin, spreading throughout her body as if every part of her was on fire, stabbing into her body down to her bones. She almost passed out once the monsters withdrew their device. The pain lingered, flaring with each sob that racked her body as her captors inspected their work. "Ah, it survived," one said. "Put her on the radar with the others." Naomi could not fight any more, sobbing as the monsters hauled her to her feet. Ahead she could see one of their craft lowering to the ground, a collection of other people prodded forward by the monsters. She did not get closer before one of the monsters' head exploded, drenching her in red mist as the headless corpse slumped over in death. The other dropped Naomi and shouted in its strange language, a loud chorus of sounds ripping through the air before it too toppled back dead. Naomi screamed as she scrambled through the mud, throwing her hands over her head in an attempt to shield herself. Out of the fires came a new monster. It was shorter than the others, and though it was dressed in similar black armor it lacked the sharp edges and blades that the others did. As the shadows parted Naomi could see it was a white-haired woman, like her grandmother but far younger and prettier. In her right hand was a large gun unlike any Naomi had seen before, and in her left was a sword cloaked in blue lightning. A brilliant red cape swept out behind her, pulled by the wind like a grand war banner. Naomi's crying abated slightly. Whoever this woman was, she was an angel among the monsters, and she would save Naomi. The monsters fired at the angel, small flickers of light forming around her as she strode forward. Soon others joined her, some carrying weapons like hers while others carried bigger ones that breathed fire. The three-armed monster charged the angel, wicked blades sweeping towards the woman's head. The angel brought her weapon up, sparks flying as the two combatants clashed. The rest of the battle faded away. All Naomi could see was the angel and the monster. At times it appeared the monster was winning, but soon the angel pushed it back, pummeling her attacker with a flurry of blows. The monster seemed gleeful at the battle, while the angel's face was one of calm determination. "Do you think to best me, monkey?" the monster hissed as it blocked another blow from the angel. "I was killing your ilk long before your emperor made his first steps into the stars. Fight all you want, but you will know the true meaning of pain once I am finished with you." The woman said nothing, drawing back into a guard position before the monster lunged forward. There was a flash before the monster's right leg exploded, causing it to pitch forward as the angel slammed a heeled boot into its back. "I fear neither pain nor death, for the light of the emperor guides my step," the angel said before reducing the monster's head and arms to nothingness. "Now burn in the hellfire of the warp, Zeno's filth." Naomi curled up into a ball, a last attempt to hide from the hell around her. The angel was still out there, but now Naomi just wanted to be left alone. Things would go back to normal, the monsters would go away, the pain would go away, and she would be fine. Her thoughts were dashed by the sound of boots coming to a stop in the mud. "What is this?" the angel asked, Naomi looking up to her. Determination had been replaced with something else, but Naomi could feel her fear fading away as the woman knelt down before her. She flinched slightly as something warm was wrapped around her, and it took her a moment to realize it was the angel's cape. "Don't worry, little sister," the woman said, giving Naomi a smile. "The monsters will not hurt you anymore. Canonis Diana was like a second mother to me," Naomi said, turning back to Twilight. "She tended to my wounds, taught me everything I know about fighting and leading sisters into battle, everything about the Emperor and his impact on our lives." Naomi closed her eyes. "But for all the kindness she showed me, she could never look past the marks I bore. No one could. So for their sake, and mine, I hid behind steel and faith, and only my devotion to the Emperor shined through." Twilight was silent for several moments, mulling over what Naomi had said. "Why do you hide it?" Twilight asked. Naomi turned towards Twilight, confused. "Why hide?" she repeated. "I am uncertain about how you were raised, but most would consider me a heretic for having a Zeno's mark anywhere on my body. But it wasn't your fault," Twilight pointed out. "You didn't get that mark willingly, and you were only a child." "But I am human," Naomi countered. "I am a sister of battle, the very image of purity and holiness in service to the Emperor. And what would the people see, if one of their heroes bore a blasphemous mark upon her skin? It would create confusion, scorn, mistrust. Do your sisters see you that way?" At this, Naomi paused. "None that live now, at least." Naomi sighed. "Almost all who were in my original batch of recruits have been taken to the Empress side in the warp. These younger ones, Ruth and Judith and Veronica, they say that they understand what had happened, but I know better." "Really?" Twilight asked, frowning. "I don't think you're completely honest with yourself, Naomi. You've treated your very existence as a failure, and you've just shut yourself away from the world around you. Blessed is the mind that is locked from within, for it may never be corrupted from without. Naomi quoted, causing Twilight's frown to deepen. "I really respect your faith," she started. "But there's using it as a shield, and then there's using it to block someone out of your life. I have already exposed myself, faith is but the only shield I have left." There was a lengthy pause, Naomi looking away again as Twilight tried to think of what else to say. "Thank you, for telling me about this," she started. When Naomi said nothing, she continued. "I know it must be hard, and I know I am really trying to understand the world you and your sisters live in, but I don't think hiding yourself away like this is good, for you or the Imperium." She took a step closer and rested a hand on the sister's shoulder, Naomi flinching slightly at her touch. "What happened to you was awful, I won't argue that, but you survived, and look where you stand now, you're a great leader, and your sisters respect you." "I am damaged, Lady Tara," Naomi replied. "Maybe, but not in the ways you think." Twilight turned Naomi towards her. Maybe you are scarred, and maybe someone might see that as a bad thing, but I don't, she smiled. I think you and your soul are far more beautiful than you take credit for, maybe you just need to let that shine through the steel and faith. Naomi blinked in surprise. Absently, her hand reached up and stroked the brand, Twilight backing off as the sister came to terms with what was said. That moment was broken by the other sisters returning, Ruth leading the way. Sister Naomi, we've completed our inquiry and are returning to our stations, she said, brimming with confidence. That confidence faded once Naomi gave no answer. Sister Naomi. Sister Naomi repeated. She said my soul was beautiful. There was a lengthy pause before Naomi spoke again. I need to be alone, as you were. The sisters had no time to respond before Naomi brushed past them, her hand still placed against her cheek. Another pause passed by before all four sisters looked to Twilight. I just wanted to know why she wore that helmet all the time, Twilight stammered, shying away from the gaze of the sisters. Please don't be mad at me. I have been trying to get Sister Naomi to open up ever since I learned about the brand, Ruth said, stepping towards Twilight. There was another pause before the sister pulled Twilight into a tight hug. Thank you. Now, she will know that the Emperor's light shines past even the darkest of Zeno's blasphemies. Twilight hesitated again, looking to the other sisters before returning the hug. You're welcome.